It was a crisp October morning in downtown Chicago. The sky hung low with a blanket of gray clouds, and the air carried the damp chill that hinted at an early winter. Benjamin Carter, a 27-year-old tech billionaire, stepped out of Carter Tower, the sleek glass and steel skyscraper that bore his family name. His designer overcoat flapped lightly in the breeze, and his leather shoes tapped decisively on the pavement. Everything about Ben radiated control and precision, from his polished silver wristwatch to the way he adjusted his silk tie without ever breaking stride. "Mr. Carter, your car is parked 2 blocks away," his assistant, Dana, informed him through the earpiece he rarely removed. "There's a blockage on Michigan Avenue." Ben didn't slow down. "How long until the Japanese delegation arrives at the office?" 17 minutes, sir. Mr. Yamamoto is already in the conference room." Ben muttered something under his breath and increased his pace. He hated being late. Ever since his father passed away when he was just 12, Ben had clawed his way through loss, loneliness, and corporate chaos to build an empire. Business magazines hailed him as the young king of Silicon Lake. His schedule was airtight. His image? Impeccable. He didn't stop for anything or anyone. But that morning, something happened. Just as he passed a modest corner bakery, nestled between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore, he heard it. A child's whisper, soft, but somehow piercing the hum of city life. "If I just eat a little bit, maybe there'll be some left for Grandma." Ben stopped walking. The voice came from a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old, standing under the bakery's small green awning. She was tiny, her coat far too thin for the weather, her hands pressed to the cold display window. Her dark brown hair was tangled into a loose braid, and her eyes, wide and solemn, were fixed on the rows of fresh bread behind the glass. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was simply watching, with a kind of longing that no child should know. Ben's heart skipped. It wasn't the kind of hunger he was used to seeing in boardrooms, solved with catered lunch trays and protein shakes. This was real hunger. The kind you feel deep in your bones. The kind that comes with uncertainty and sacrifice. He reached up and turned off his earpiece without thinking. For the first time in years, the world around him faded. It was just him and this little girl. He took a tentative step toward her. Then another. And before he could process what he was doing, the man who closed billion-dollar deals with a glance found himself speechless, standing in the drizzle outside a bakery, talking to a hungry child. "Hi," he said softly. His voice, usually firm and sharp, came out gentle, almost unfamiliar. That moment, in the middle of a busy Chicago morning, was when everything began to change. Ben Carter had always been known as a man who never looked back. But as he knelt beside the little girl in front of the bakery, something in her eyes tugged at a memory buried deep, one of warmth, of cinnamon-scented mornings, of safety in a kitchen where someone noticed when he was sad. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Lila." "That's a beautiful name," he said, offering her a small smile. "Would it be all right if I bought you something to eat? And maybe something for your grandma too?" Her big brown eyes scanned his face. There was caution there, but also hope. Slowly, she nodded. Inside the bakery, the warmth hit them immediately. The scent of sourdough and apple turnovers filled the air, and Lila's eyes lit up like Christmas lights. Ben crouched beside her at the glass counter, pointing out rolls, loaves, and pastries, asking which she wanted. She chose carefully, just enough for herself and her grandmother. No more. He added more to the order anyway. Soup, extra bread, even a slice of chocolate cake. Then he asked, "Would you mind if I gave you a ride home?" I'd feel better knowing you and your grandma got these home safely. She looked unsure, so he added softly, you can tell me where to go. I promise I'll just drive. Outside, his black Lincoln SUV pulled up. Lila climbed into the back seat, wide-eyed at the leather interior and soft lights overhead. She clutched the bag of food to her chest like it was gold. They drove through neighborhoods that looked more worn down with every block, chipped paint, chain-link fences, and small front yards cluttered with plastic chairs and old toys. Eventually, Lila pointed to a 3-story brick apartment building with peeling blue paint. That's us, she said. Ben carried the bags up 3 flights of creaky stairs. At the 3rd floor, she knocked on a faded door with a small potted plant beside it. Grandma. I brought food, and a nice man. The door opened slowly. And then time stopped. The woman standing in the doorway, her hair streaked with gray, her cheeks thin but familiar, stared at Ben in shock. Ben, she whispered. His breath caught. Elena? He hadn't seen her in nearly 20 years. She had been the cook, the caretaker, the only stable presence in his chaotic childhood home. She had made pancakes shaped like stars on Sunday mornings, tucked him in when his parents were at galas, and knew he hated mushrooms in his pasta. You two know each other? Lila asked, looking from one to the other. Elena nodded, eyes welling with tears. Yes, sweetheart, she said softly. I used to know him when he was little, just like you. Ben felt something break open inside him. He had come to deliver bread. Instead, he'd come face to face with a piece of his own forgotten heart. Elena stepped aside and gently ushered Ben into the apartment. It was small, no more than 700 square feet, but clean and full of life. Handmade quilts covered the sofa, children's drawings framed in construction paper lined the walls, and the scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air. I didn't expect to ever see you again, Elena said, still a little breathless. Ben looked around, absorbing everything, the well-worn kitchen table, the chipped but polished floor tiles, the sense of care in every corner. It wasn't much by most standards, but it had the kind of warmth no penthouse ever truly had. I didn't know you were here, he replied, his voice quiet. I thought you'd gone back to Mexico. That's what my father told me. Elena smiled faintly, her eyes flicking with memories. He said that to protect himself, I imagine. After your mother left, he let me go. Said the house was too quiet to need a cook anymore. Ben felt a flush of shame. His father, so consumed with appearances and business deals, had always dismissed people as if they were replaceable. But Elena had been different. She had been the heart of that cold, echoing house. And your daughter? Ben asked gently, glancing at Lila, who was now busy unpacking the food on the kitchen counter. Elena's face grew somber. Her name's Carmen. She left a few years ago. Got mixed up with a man who wasn't kind. When things got bad, she brought Lila here and disappeared. Said she'd come back once it was safe. But it's been almost 2 years. Ben sat in stunned silence. A 4-year-old child, left in the care of a grandmother surviving on almost nothing, and yet the home still radiated kindness and dignity. She takes care of me, and I take care of her, Lila chimed in, holding up a round loaf of bread with pride. Elena smiled and ruffled her granddaughter's hair. She does. After a moment of quiet, Ben reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. Elena. I'd like to help. Financially. Just something to make things easier for you and Lila. Her smile faded, and she gently pushed the envelope back across the table. No, Ben. I appreciate it, but I can't accept money like that. He blinked, confused. Why not? Because I want Lila to see that dignity matters more than handouts. We may not have much, but we earn what we have. Her words hit him harder than he expected. In his world, problems were solved with wire transfers and contracts. But here, in this tiny apartment filled with hand-sewn curtains and second-hand furniture, he was reminded that not everything could, or should, be bought. That night, as Ben left Elena's apartment and stepped back into the chilly Chicago air, he carried more than a memory. He carried a question he couldn't yet answer. How do you truly help someone, without taking away their pride? Ben Carter hadn't been able to sleep that night. Even with the blackout shades drawn tight in his high-rise condo and the quiet hum of the city far below, his thoughts kept circling back to that tiny third-floor apartment. To Elena's tired smile. To the conviction in her voice when she refused his offer. To Lila's tiny hands cradling that loaf of bread like it was treasure. He woke early the next morning, pulled a dusty box from the top shelf of his closet, and began digging through it. Inside were remnants of a childhood half-forgotten, old baseball cards, school ribbons, and a small, red notebook. He froze. The notebook had a flour-stained cover, its pages yellowed with time. It was Elena's old recipe book, the one she'd always scribbled in when she worked in his family's kitchen. Somehow, it had found its way into his childhood keepsakes, maybe tucked there in a rare moment of sentimentality before she left. He opened it carefully. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, elegant, slanted, warm. Buttermilk biscuits for cold days. Double chocolate cake, Mr. Carter's favorite. Sunday pancakes for little Ben, shaped like elephants. Ben chuckled softly. He had nearly forgotten those pancakes. Shaped like elephants, dinosaurs, even little stars. They had been the highlight of his otherwise lonely childhood. An idea began to take shape. He didn't want to give Elena charity. But what if he could offer her something else, something she could build, something she could own? That same afternoon, he visited a vacant storefront just 4 blocks from Elena's apartment. It had once been a cafe but had closed during the pandemic. The space was small, about 900 square feet, but had a working kitchen, a walk-in cooler, and big bay windows perfect for displaying fresh bread. Ben contacted a contractor he trusted and started running numbers. He called in a favor from his legal team to draw up a simple business agreement. Then, a few days later, he returned to Elena's apartment. This time, he carried 2 things, the red recipe book and a carefully drafted proposal. "I have a different kind of offer," he said after they sat down. He laid the documents on the table and slid the recipe book gently toward her. "I found this," he said. "And I had a thought. What if we opened a bakery together, right here in the neighborhood? I'll invest. You'll run it. Your recipes, your vision. We'll split the profits." Elena stared at the book as if it were a long-lost child. "You wouldn't be doing it alone," he added. "I'll handle the business side. You'll bring the heart." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a long moment, she said nothing. Then, with a quiet but firm voice, she replied, "If we do this, Ben, it has to be a real partnership. Not a favor. Not a gift. A business, with respect and dignity." Ben smiled, deeply and genuinely. "That's exactly what I had in mind." By early spring, the old cafe on Castle Street had been transformed. Gone were the dusty booths and faded signage. In their place stood a cozy, sunlit bakery with cream-colored walls, warm wooden shelves, and the faint scent of fresh vanilla and rising dough. The sign over the door was simple, painted by hand with care, "Elena's Breads." Underneath, in smaller script, it read, "Traditional recipes, made with love." It had been Elena's idea to keep it personal. "People don't want perfect," she told Ben one afternoon while dusting flour off her apron. "They want real. They want to taste something that feels like home." The bakery's kitchen had been designed to her specifications: low shelves for easy access, a vintage mixer she insisted on keeping from her old job, and a corner just for Lila, where a small child's table stood ready with crayons, paper, and a little apron with her name embroidered in red. Ben stopped by nearly every day. At first, he claimed it was just to check on the progress. But over time, it became clear he wasn't there for spreadsheets. He was there for the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the morning, for the joy on Lila's face as she shaped bread dough into braids, and for the quiet, steady comfort of watching something meaningful take root. Neighbors started noticing the activity. Curious faces peeked in the windows during renovation, and once the "Coming Soon" sign was replaced with an open one, the scent alone was enough to bring people in. On the bakery's soft launch day, a line had already formed by 7:45 a.m. By 8:15, the sourdough loaves were gone. The banana nut muffins sold out shortly after. One customer said the oatmeal cookies tasted just like her grandmother's from rural Indiana. Another said the potato rolls reminded him of his wife's holiday baking from back when their kids were little. Elena took every compliment with quiet gratitude, her hands busy but her eyes brighter than they'd been in years. Ben, for his part, sat at the corner table sipping black coffee from a mismatched ceramic mug. Lila stood beside him, carefully drawing a cartoon version of the bakery with crayon-colored loaves and hearts in the windows. "You're our bread boss," she declared matter-of-factly, handing him the picture. He laughed. "Is that my official title?" "Yes," she nodded. "You bring the money, Grandma brings the bread, and I bring the decorations." "Fair enough," he replied, tucking the drawing into the inside pocket of his jacket. It was a far cry from boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. But in that little bakery, surrounded by warmth, purpose, and people who truly mattered, Ben Carter felt something he hadn't in years. He felt like he belonged. It was a quiet Thursday evening when everything changed again. The bakery had just closed for the day. Elena was wiping down the counter while Lila, still wearing her flour-dusted apron, hummed a little tune and organized napkins into neat piles at the front table. Ben had stopped by with a small bouquet of spring tulips, purple and yellow, the kind Elena used to place in mason jars by the windows of his childhood home. They were packing up when the knock came at the door. Not the kind of knock meant for buying bread. It was soft. Hesitant. Lila skipped to open it but paused when she saw the envelope on the floor. It was plain white, the kind you'd find in a dollar store. No stamp. No return address. Just one word, written in neat handwriting, Elena. Ben picked it up and handed it to her, his brow furrowed. Elena stared at the envelope for a long moment before slowly peeling it open. Inside was a handwritten letter, slightly smudged in places, as if the ink had met a few tears along the way. Her hands trembled. "It's from Carmen," she whispered. Ben's eyes widened. "Your daughter?" Elena nodded slowly. "She's alive." The room seemed to hold its breath as she read. The letter was simple but raw. Carmen explained how she had fled to protect Lila from a violent partner, how she'd kept her distance for fear of putting her mother and child in danger. But now, with the man behind bars, she had been watching, from afar. Watching the bakery rise, watching Elena's smile return, watching Lila grow stronger each day. "I want to come back," Carmen wrote. "If you'll have me. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm ready to try." Elena pressed the letter to her chest, tears quietly slipping down her cheeks. Ben stood nearby, unsure if he should speak, when Lila approached, her little voice filled with concern. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Elena knelt and pulled her granddaughter close. "These are happy tears, honey. Sometimes people cry when good things happen, too." That Sunday morning, just as the scent of Elena's famous elephant-shaped pancakes began wafting through the apartment, there was another knock. This one wasn't followed by an envelope. It was followed by Carmen. She stood there, thinner than Elena remembered, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her eyes red from either the cold or from crying. Probably both. "Mom," she began, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry. I never stopped loving her. I never stopped loving you." Without a word, Elena opened her arms. They stood in the doorway, wrapped in an embrace 2 years overdue. Lila peeked out from behind Ben's leg. She looked at her mother for a long moment, then asked in that sweet, unfiltered way only a child can, "Do you like elephant pancakes?" Carmen laughed through her tears. "I used to. Very much." "Good," Lila said, slipping her small hand into her mother's. "Because we made extra." And just like that, the family began to mend, over pancakes, warm syrup, and the courage to forgive. 3 months after Carmen returned, Elena's Breads was busier than ever. Saturday mornings brought a small line of regulars down Castle Street, folks from all walks of life, drawn not only by the warm sourdough and pecan sticky buns, but by something deeper. There was a feeling inside the shop that you couldn't get from any chain bakery. It was the kind of place where someone remembered your name, asked how your grandson's baseball game went, and slipped an extra oatmeal cookie into your bag just because. Carmen had eased back into the rhythms of the family like a bird returning to its nest. She didn't come back perfect, no one expected that, but she came back ready. Ready to help, to heal, to reconnect. She managed the front of the shop now, greeting customers with a quiet sincerity that softened over time. Elena, once afraid she'd lost both her daughter and her strength, now moved with purpose again. Her health was better, her steps steadier. Each morning, she tied on her apron, just as she had decades ago, and began the day by kneading dough in a kitchen filled with sunlight and second chances. And Ben? Ben had changed, too. The man who once measured time in corporate earnings and flight schedules now marked his weeks by Lila's school calendar and the bakery's rotating menu. On Wednesdays, he brought new ingredients, small luxuries like Madagascar vanilla or imported cinnamon. On Sundays, he brought fruit for pancake breakfasts and stayed to hear Lila read the stories she wrote in her blue notebook. He had traded the silence of his high-rise for the chaos of flour-covered counters and sticky fingers tugging at his sleeve. And he wouldn't have it any other way. One quiet afternoon, as the lunch rush dwindled, Ben sat at the table near the front window, sipping coffee from his usual mug. Lila plopped beside him with her notebook, cheeks pink from excitement. "I finished our story," she announced, opening the worn blue cover. Inside was a drawing of 3 stick figures, Grandma, Mommy, and Ben, standing in front of the bakery. Above them, in big, rainbow letters, it read, "We're a team." Ben smiled, feeling something stir deep in his chest. "Can I read it to you?" she asked. "Of course," he said, setting his mug aside. As she read in her halting but confident voice, customers passed through the door, the bell chiming softly above them. No one knew who Ben really was, or how many companies bore his name across tall glass buildings. And, strangely, it didn't matter anymore. In this little corner of the city, he wasn't the CEO. He was something better. He was family. It was a Sunday morning in late October when Ben Carter realized he no longer needed an alarm clock. The smell of fresh pancakes and brewed coffee drifting from Elena's kitchen had become a more reliable wake-up call than any smartphone app. He stepped out of the guest room, barefoot on the creaky hardwood floor, following the scent like a memory pulling him forward. Lila was already at the table, still in her fuzzy pajama pants with little cartoon owls on them, flipping through her blue notebook like it held national secrets. "Mr. Ben," she said, beaming. "You're just in time for the best part." "What's that?" he asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. She held up a page with a drawing of 3 stick figures standing beneath a bakery sign. "The ending." He sat beside her, quietly watching as Elena placed a plate of elephant-shaped pancakes in front of them, just like she used to when he was a boy. Carmen, now more relaxed, stood by the counter pouring orange juice into glasses. "So," Lila said seriously, "this is how the story ends." She opened the final page and began to read. "Once there was a girl named Lila who was very hungry. But instead of finding just food, she found a friend. And that friend found a family. And Grandma found hope. And Mommy found her way home. And they all found a place where the bread was warm, and the hearts were even warmer." She looked up. "The end." Ben swallowed hard, feeling something in his chest he didn't have a name for. "That's a perfect ending," he said, his voice low. Lila grinned. "But Grandma says there's no such thing as an ending when you're still baking." Elena chuckled from the kitchen. "That's right. As long as there's dough to rise and stories to tell, there's always a new beginning waiting." That afternoon, Ben took a slow walk back to his downtown condo, not because he needed space, but because the crisp autumn air made him feel grounded. When he reached his building, he paused in the lobby and looked up at the towering glass structure. Once, this was the legacy he thought he wanted. A name etched in steel. Success defined by square footage and financial pages. But now, his true legacy smelled like cinnamon and rising dough. It laughed like a 4-year-old with flour on her nose. It stood behind a worn oak counter, serving coffee with calloused but capable hands. It lived in a place that didn't bear his name, but did bear his heart. Back at Elena's Breads, the sun was setting, casting golden light across the front window. A handwritten sign in the glass read, "Open Monday through Saturday. Sundays reserved for pancakes and stories." And inside, surrounded by love, laughter, and the smell of home, Ben Carter finally knew. He wasn't just part of someone else's story. He had found his own. In a world that often moves too fast, it's easy to lose sight of what truly matters. We chase milestones, career success, financial stability, social recognition, only to find, later in life, that the things with the greatest value are often the most ordinary: a warm meal shared with loved ones, the voice of a child reading a story, the comfort of being known and accepted for who we are. The story of Ben, Elena, and little Lila is a gentle but powerful reminder that fulfillment doesn't come from achievements or acquisitions, it comes from connection. Ben, a wealthy man who had everything money could buy, discovered he was emotionally bankrupt until a hungry child reminded him how to see again, not just with his eyes, but with his heart. For many older adults, this message strikes a deep chord. We've lived long enough to understand that life's most important work is not always found in boardrooms or bank accounts, but in kitchens, at dinner tables, on porches, and in quiet moments with family. The act of showing up, of listening, of making space for others, that is where love lives. The story also speaks to the power of second chances. Elena, once dismissed and forgotten, reclaims her dignity not by accepting charity, but by using her talent to create something meaningful. Carmen, lost and broken, returns to rebuild her life and mend her relationship with her family. Forgiveness plays a central role, not as a weakness, but as a courageous choice that frees both the giver and the receiver. This tale also celebrates legacy, not in terms of money or fame, but in how we influence the next generation. Lila, with her innocent wisdom, teaches everyone around her that love is best expressed in simple ways, through stories, shared meals, and time together. What we model, children remember. And those small, everyday moments often become the most cherished. So what can we take from this story? We are never too old to make a difference. Whether through offering kindness, mentoring someone younger, or simply being present for those who need us, our lives continue to have value and meaning. We are never too successful to show compassion. And we are never too far gone to seek forgiveness or to offer it. In the end, we are remembered not for what we built, but for how we made others feel. The love we give, the hands we hold, the hearts we help mend, these are the true legacies we leave behind. Let this story be an invitation to reconnect with family, to forgive where forgiveness is needed, to listen with empathy, to bake bread not for profit, but for love. Because no matter our age, there's always time to rediscover what matters most.